Let me let you in on a little secret. There is one thing, one little thing that we might be doing, you might be doing, that impacts us in such a big way. But if you stop doing this, yes, if you stop doing this one thing, that then allows you to live life even fuller.
Born in 92 on the block with the Sharks. Come from a different cloth, y'all will get ripped apart. You want it diamond, then you gotta get it in the dark. We dropping nuggets like Carmelo went to Rucker Park. Now we eating from state to state, we scrape the plate. I put my eggs in a basket, took a leap of faith. I took a chance, now we grow and see the impact. Decoding Success with special guests, now let's bring Matt.
Welcome to the Decoding Success Podcast. I am super excited that you are here and we are back with some solo content. I said to myself, you know what, let's chop it up. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing here today. If this is your first time checking out the show, welcome. If you are a returning member of our incredible community, we welcome you back for what we have in store today. And I want to start you off with the point of this episode. In fact, the point is when we avoid short-term discomfort, we prolong the hurt. When we move into short-term discomfort, we provide ourselves with the opportunity to experience a growth spurt. And yes, it was supposed to rhyme, in case you were wondering. That is the point of it. In other words, what we're talking about here today is avoidance. Now, as a recovering avoider in many different regards, a lot of black sheep happen to experience it. And why is that? If you are a black sheep, if you are someone that has felt isolated, neglected, rejected, maybe something different, it's very common for us to avoid. Well, why? We want love. And when you are neglected, when you are isolated, when you are rejected, or anything else of the sort, one thing you feel like you aren't getting is exactly that, love. Love is such a beautiful thing that you want to experience. Everyone has it within them. Everyone has it to give. But when we want to receive it, of course, it's going to be something that we might avoid in situations that might not be so loving. For example, if you have the opportunity to have an uncomfortable conversation, that might be something you avoid. An uncomfortable conversation with a partner, uncomfortable conversation with a family member, maybe an uncomfortable conversation with yourself. We avoid it. Why? We don't want to ruffle the feathers. We don't want the water to become muddy. We just want it to be clear. So what do? We compromise. And in that compromise, essentially we're avoiding. And in return, what does that do? Prolongs the hurt, generates resentment, and so many other things. I'm going to give you a story. The first time that I remember avoiding, now keep in mind, I'm saying this is the first time I remember doing it. It might not have been the first time I avoided. Clearly, my remembrance of this particular scenario or event that has taken place in my life, it was the time it worked. So for me to know it had worked, it had to have happened before that. And this goes back so many years, right? If you were someone that danced growing up or played a sport or maybe even an instrument, I am sure at times you know what it's like to have to wake up early on the weekends. Right? You had to wake up early to go to the game or go to the dance recital or whatever your cup of tea was at that time. And that's the exact position I was in the first time I remember avoiding. I was on the way to a baseball game. I played baseball and basketball my entire life, as many of you know. If you don't know, again, welcome to the show. But playing baseball and basketball, heading to a baseball game or a tournament, actually, out in Long Island, New York. And I remember it so vividly. We were in a pitcher's duel. I was on the pitcher's mound for my team, and on the opposing side were kids we never knew. We never met them before, but they were damn good. We had our fiery red jerseys on, we all sported it so damn well. It was probably about 80 degrees or something of the sort. Perfect summer day. Perfect weather to be a pitcher, by the way. You never wanted to be out there when it was 90 degrees and you were absolutely dripping, even as a kid. But the absolute perfect weather to just sit outside and really enjoy it. Also the perfect weather to be a pitcher. Furthermore, I'm in this pitcher's duel. Right? We're going back and forth. No team was able to score. We were barely able to get on base. And that in itself was frustrating. But now that I'm able to look back on this moment, what a cool freaking moment to be in. Until it wasn't. I remember vividly coming to the end of that particular game, or close to the end of the game, going into the last inning. And our team came up at the plate and again couldn't score. So then, it's my turn to get back out there and get on the mound. And for some reason, I looked at my coach and I lied to him. And I said to my coach, my shoulder's bothering me. Now, if you played sports, that is one hell of a way to get out of doing something. You're never going to be told to force through or fight through an injury. If you wanted to and tap into that mentality and that's your cup of tea, great, go for it. In this case, my shoulder wasn't bothering me, but what I was doing was avoiding the discomfort of potentially failing. Not just failing myself, failing my team. Maybe even in my mind, I was like, wow, I'm going to make my dad look bad. Whatever it was at the time, I can't necessarily pinpoint it, but what I can pinpoint was that in that moment, I avoided the hard thing. That hard thing then continued to translate in other areas of life. It's not just about sports, guys. It's much bigger than that. I have avoided in relationships. I have avoided with self. I have avoided with friends. I have avoided in work and in business and maybe even in podcasting. How crazy is that to think? So I want you to start to think about when you have avoided. And as I mentioned, what you're actually doing when you avoid is short-term, in your imagination, avoiding the pain, the discomfort, the anxiety, the worry, the whatever might be coming up for you, short-term. What you're actually avoiding, grand scheme, zoom out, is your potential. Going back to the example of being on the pitcher's mound, I was avoiding my potential. My character was being made in that moment. Whether I succeeded or failed, the win was in the character development. I didn't give myself the chance to develop my character. You have to have a hard conversation with your significant other. That might result in a breakup. That might result in you two being on bad terms for a week or 2 months or whatever it may be. The win is in the character development. And when you avoid, you are really avoiding your long-term potential. You are avoiding your ability to experience life fully because you're trying to control. And when you try to control, well, things aren't going to happen, right? You're playing small with that control. I'm going to give you another story. This is a shout out to Rory Vaden of Brand Builders Group, New York Times bestselling author. In fact, he was actually a guest on this show back in 2019. And he talks about one of his signature stories is about being a buffalo. What does that mean? Very metaphorical, but also very true and practical at the same time. When a storm is coming, a buffalo has the instinct of moving into the storm. The inverse is a cow, and the cow's instinct is to move away from the storm. The difference between the two is that the cow actually prolongs their pain by simply avoiding the storm. The buffalo endures the pain of the short term to receive the glory of getting out of that storm quicker than the cow does. So I want to leave you with 5 behaviors to walk away from, 5 action items, because it's one thing to tell you stories. It's one thing to share points that rhyme and things of that sort. It's another thing to actually leave you with things to walk away from this episode with. I don't want to be the person that contributes to anyone getting mentally fat or mentally out of shape. I want you to actually deploy what we're talking about here. And these are the 5 things that I started to do when I had the awakening of the avoidance that was taking place in my life. And again, not just in sports. I'm talking about in relationships, in business, right here on this podcast, and so much more. How about this? Let me just throw another example out there. For so long, I avoided doing what we're doing right here. Coming into the studio. If you've watched past episodes, you see us engaging with our guest. I avoided that for so long because it was much safer to do it from the other side of the screen, as opposed to being an arm's distance away from reaching our guest. That was avoided, right? So I don't want you to come and view me as this person that's speaking from, hey, he's just talking like, No, guys, I experienced this shit. Really experienced it. 5 behaviors. Number 1 is to become aware to the idea that you actually might be avoiding. It's that simple. Just be open. Open your mind to the fact that you might be avoiding. Some ways to think about it is, hey, like, am I letting stuff slide in my relationship? Am I brushing things under the rug that aren't sitting well with me at home? This doesn't have to necessarily just be with your significant other. Maybe it's with your kids. Maybe it's with your parents. Maybe it's with your siblings, your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents, whoever it may be. Are you letting things slide in your business, with your coworkers, with your team members, with your manager, with your boss? Where are you just allowing things to exist because you don't want to ruffle those feathers? So I want you to open up your mind and open up your heart to that idea that you might actually be avoiding. And I'll put this out there. The fact that you're listening to this, the fact that you're actually watching this, whatever you are doing right now, tells me that there is a good chance you're probably doing it. Number 2, I want you to write down what you actually are avoiding. Now that you have the awareness, jot it down. Pen and paper. Go old school. I'm not a fan of the digital stuff, like the notes in the phone, I never look at them. I go super old school with it. I want to see it in front of my face. When the pen goes to the pad, there is some power in that, right? It is such a release. And it also helps us really just look at it in front of us and it's like, whoa, I am avoiding all of this, or maybe I'm avoiding some of this, or whatever the case may be. If it's 3 things or 30, no matter where you fall on that spectrum, the purpose is just to enhance your awareness by actually putting it down on paper. Now, number 3 is I want you to asterisk where you can start on that list. I'm not the type of person that's going to tell you, jump off the cliff and build a plane on the way down. I'm the type of person to tell you to take a step in the right direction. So I want you to look at your list and put an asterisk, maybe next to 1, maybe next to 2, maybe next to 3 of the potential areas that you want to confront the things that you have been avoiding. It actually is as simple as doing that, and the next step makes it even easier. It's to practice. I want you to practice having the conversation with your significant other. I want you to practice having it with your parent or whoever it may be. Take a swing at it from a practice perspective. You don't get up to the plate without getting in the batter's box first. You don't run before you could walk. So when you build your list, you get comfortable with that list. You put an asterisk next to like, hey, this is like my first step. You're building that hierarchy by putting that asterisk next to it. Great. Next, practice that conversation. I'm not telling you to practice it to the point where you psych yourself out from having it. I'm not telling you to practice in a sense where you visualize the most optimistic outcome, because at the end of the day, it could very well be an outcome that is not so great. But the purpose is to stand up for yourself. The feathers need to be ruffled in life, right? Respect comes out on the other side of all of this. And the last step here is to actually step into the arena, right? So I want you to become aware that you might actually be avoiding. Number 2, write down where you have been avoiding. Number 3, asterisk where you can start. Number 4, practice having that conversation. Number 5, step into the arena when you feel ready for it. All of that being said, I'm going to leave you with this last point. Again, when we avoid short-term discomfort, we prolong the hurt. When we move into short-term discomfort, we hit a growth spurt. That simple. Appreciate each and every one of you tuning into this. In the show notes of this episode, you could find the YouTube link if you want to watch these. If you're on YouTube and you want to listen to these and catch them on the go, you could check that out in the show notes of this episode as well. Until next time, everyone, be blessed. Peace.